This week on Mixed and Mastered, we welcome Damon DeGraff, the visionary behind DGI management and a driving force in global DJ culture. From managing icons like Mark Ronson and DJ Cassidy to producing events with ESPN and Valentino, Damon has built an extraordinary career in music, culture, and entertainment. We dive into his journey and how he continues to innovate worldwide. This is Mixed and Mastered with Damon DeGraff. Welcome to Mixed and Mastered, the podcast where the stories of the music industry come to life. I'm Jeffrey Sledge, bringing you real conversations with the people who have shaped the sound of music. We're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to make it in the music business. These are the stories you won't hear anywhere else, told by the people who live them. This is Mixed and Mastered. All right, Mixed and Mastered with my man Dame DeGraff. How you doing, man?
Yes, I'm good, brother. How's everything? Long time.
Looking good, looking healthy, looking prosperous, looking rich.
Yeah, you know. Hey,
let me hold something, Dame. Let me hold something till tomorrow.
That's where it starts, I start with the health aspect, and everything else falls into play after that. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you, brother.
Absolutely. So let's start at the beginning. You're born and raised in Bermuda, correct?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, a lot of people don't really know this. I was actually born in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Really?
I know nothing about it though. My mom was there. Her and my dad lived there when she was getting her master's. So I was pretty much, I don't even know if I was conceived there, but I was born there, which was a blessing. It allows me to have
state
dual citizenship.
Nice. Yeah.
But I was raised in Bermuda. So that's like pretty much all I know.
Tell me a little bit about being raised in Bermuda. Like what was it like, just in general?
Oh, it's great. I mean, island life, it doesn't get better than that. Sunshine, running, playing soccer, playing football, friends that I still have from today. I mean, it's just a different energy kind of growing up in the Caribbean. I think, there's hardship everywhere, but I guess, things are probably a little different when there is sunshine and palm trees, right?
Fresh fruit, fresh
fruit and all those other things, and also just the mindset. I think it's a lot different as well, just because it's not like, not saying that people aren't ambitious and don't want to get it, but I think because of that setting, it's a lot easier than like, New York, which I love, but it's a jungle, right? You know what I mean? Like it's concrete, it's hard hitting, like you got to get it, you got to do it, you got to be it. So yeah, man. I mean, island life, it's actually beautiful. And I mean, it's actually brought me back to a lot of the things that I'm doing now are in that space as well. So it's kind of brought me back full circle.
So tell me about what sparked your interest in music.
So I've always been, I'll say my mother's side and my dad's side were both into music growing up, right? So I think between my mom's mom being the premier piano teacher on the island.
Oh, wow.
My dad's family playing in like the drum corps, also being in church, kind of Black Caribbean churches. So that's where a lot of the kind of harmonies and the soulful things of whatever come into. So, I remember, being in little choirs and this and that, and it was the harmonies and, all these different things. So it's always been a part of me, right? Like it's for as long as I can remember. And then you even think from the cultural aspect, it's like you're hearing dancehall, you're hearing soca, you're hearing, I remember it was this station, FM 89, which played like Phil Collins and Paul Simon and like, all of those era of music, which a lot of the dancehall guys would remake those songs. Right. So I would hear
the dub plates,
the Sanchez version or the Frankie Paul version in the club and hear the FM 89 version afterwards. And I'm like, oh, they just redid Sanchez's song when it was the opposite way. So yeah, music's just been a part of me, man. Like it's just something that's always, and I've always loved it and always gravitate towards it in every way.
That's dope. And I did a little research and I saw you were a DJ for a bit too, correct? You had a sound system.
Well, yeah. So I had a sound system. We were called Nasty Boys.
Dope.
and we were like, cutting dubs and, like young island kids. That's, ties back into the growing up on an island, right? It's kind of like, what were the things, you played sports, but then you had a sound system looking up to like the Stone Loves and Bodyguards and Eddies of the world. So yeah, and I mean, it even, I still DJ some now. So it's just a part of my life that I speak to, but didn't, because it's just kind of what I love, right? It's just the essence of music and vibration. So wherever I can give that energy to, it's pretty constant.
That vibration thing you say is interesting because I didn't grow up a dance hall or a reggae fan. I didn't hate it. I just it wasn't part of my world. It was my world
Right.
was hip hop and R&B and stuff. But it's interesting because when I've gone to the islands, to Jamaica, I went to the Bahamas for a bit as well, and hearing that music in its space, it makes
Right.
sense. It
Yeah,
makes
it's
so much
everything.
sense if you're there. It's like,
Right.
this is because everything you said, everything around you, you understand what that rhythm comes from and what
Right.
that those feelings and those vibes. To sound cliche, but those vibes come from, and it's like I remember I went real quick, and I'll move on because I went to Junkanoo in the
Okay.
Bahamas, and I
Right.
remember it was so interesting because we were there. It was around New Year's, and we were there, and I remember we were standing in place when the parade is going by, and I remember it was interesting because each element would go by, and then another element would go by, and another sound would go by, and I was like, "Oh, this now I understand." They're like
Now you
building it.
get it. Right.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Okay.
It was really interesting. So, tell me about coming to New York. What was that? What made you do that, and what was that about?
I wanted to be in the music business, just to give you the short side.
Mm-hmm.
I had a cousin, I was in boarding school and I had a cousin who was a year ahead of me, was in college in Alabama, and his roommate was this guy from New York. I want to say his name was Rob. But
Hmm.
Rob was a rapper, and my cousin was a rapper too, right? And I was like, oh, I'll just be your manager because I think I always wanted to be in music, right? I didn't know what I was really doing. I was just like, I will be your manager.
Yeah.
And I think like that's when like Puff was getting going and Jermaine Dupri in Atlanta and like Freaknik and all that stuff was happening, right? Not to date myself, but like,
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
there and I remember seeing like Biggie at one Freaknik and just the energy of all of that. And I was just like, yo, like that's what I really want to do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, I was talking about this the other day. In my high school yearbook, when they'll do those pictures and the images and like, what do you want to be when you get? I was like, yeah, I want to be a music promoter. But at that point, I didn't even know the different like levels or tiers of the music business. I just knew that sounded like something I wanted to do or be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, that's it, right? So it's funny being in it now, when you talk about manifestation or things that you speak to, not even knowing that that's what it was, but speaking it into existence, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I ended up being in college for 2 years, and I said to my mom, and I was like, like I don't really want to do this anymore because I love sports, but I was doing like physical education, right? And I was
Mm.
just like, can you see me being a? I'll probably be a dope phys ed teacher, just to be
Yeah.
honest.
You'll be like a
But
gym teacher or something. Yeah. A coach
so
or
anyway,
something.
my mom says, give me a proposal because my mom is in education.
Uh huh.
She's like, give me a proposal. And if you give me a proposal, then I'll let you do it. I don't think she thought that I was going to do it, to be honest. And I researched and I found this school in New York called the Institute of Audio Research. And I don't know if it still exists, but they had courses. And, I've always been smart, probably more like street smart and like, or more just like, I don't know, like I'm lost for the word. But education wise, I knew I could do it. So I would skate by, right? You know what I mean? Like I wasn't running to say, I'm trying to get A's and B's. I knew I could get A's and B's, but I was just interested in other things because I was a creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's something else to talk about at another point too, is how the creatives aren't ever really celebrated or really harnessed at that age when not everyone's going to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? But that's a whole nother thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I did the proposal, I came to school, and I like flew through the school because it was something that I really wanted to do. So that was my first entryway into the music business and New York because I actually wanted to be an engineer. So I was going to school to be an engineer. And then it just so happened that they do job placement or intern placement. And my first internship was at ASCAP. It was under Bill Brown. And I want to say Tina somebody, not Tina Davis, but it was, or maybe Audrey. I don't remember. It was a very long time ago. But I remember Bill Brown. And
Okay.
yeah, so that was my first introduction to the music business and
Wow.
to New York City. Yeah.
And so after the ASCAP internship, what happened after that point?
So it's funny. And I think, you spoke about this earlier. And I kind of forgot this part, but this was a very pivotal part when I really think about it. Because I always go right to the me at Sheba Sound and Mark Ronson and D'Angelo. But in between that, I don't even know how it happened. I think maybe it happened through a temp agency, but I ended up it was Dallas Austin's label Free World.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this was early Free World. This is when Free World had a deal with Zumba.
Wow.
And so Free World had Kenny Burns was there, Slim Pickens was there, and my man Leonard Brooks had a little corner office where he was doing like Levert and all of that,
Yeah,
right?
because he's from Cleveland. Yep,
Right.
exactly.
So that was my first, when I think about music business, that was my first real like these are guys that are a little older than me. I think Kenny had like 26, 20 at the time. So we were just kind of moving and I felt like I was a part of something, you know? I forget the artist. I think the girl's name was Lizette, I think was the singer's name that we were working with.
Sounds familiar. You might be right.
I think the song was Young, Wild, and Free.
Okay.
I wouldn't say, don't quote me, but I'm sure that it was that a very long time ago. But yeah, that was probably my next, kind of step into the music business. And I mean, that opened up a lot of, I would say, connections and doors and just meeting a lot of people that were like me and that were just of our culture, right?
Yeah,
Because at
coming in
that
and out the
point,
office and hanging out.
right, like I was a young kid from Bermuda. ASCAP was a performance rights organization. So you're not really seeing the source.
No.
Like you might get to an event and it's cool, you meet some people but you ain't really in like the mix of guys that are like shaking, right? And so, yeah, dude, I was running and I mean, a lot of the guys, obviously we're still all friends, but, I had met like, the Chuck Bones at Motown, the Bobby Springsteens, the, Byron Kirklands, Andre Harrell, God rest his soul, Neil McKnight, like all of those guys. So we were just in this motion of just like, shoot, it's like, this is the music business, right?
Yeah, we out here.
We like out here, right? So to a young kid from the islands, you're like, yo, like I'm at Howard's Homecoming, I'm at these places, and you felt like you were a part of something. And then I think, Freetown, I don't know, things happen, deals get lost. And then I was, running with Kenny for a minute, and then we were moving. And then I think Kenny either moved to LA or back to Atlanta. And then I was like back on my own. But the level of experience that I learned in that time, and even just like the level of like just hustle, you know what I mean? Like, because it's like, I wasn't learning that at ASCAP, right? You know what I mean? Like, it was just kind of like, yeah, just kind of pushing papers and moving whatever. I
ASCAP
wish I had learned some of that.
ASCAP is a paper pusher job, and respectfully, I'm not saying it to be disrespectful, but you're at your desk and you're doing your work. But you're not. You say you're not in the mix. You're not going out at night. You're not. You're just going to the gig and you're doing your thing and you're meeting people who come into the office, but you're not flowing. You're not flowing.
And if anybody knows me, like I flow, so that would have killed me, right? You know what I mean? Like that's just wasn't my energy. So I feel like, God put me in this position to learn, right? You know what I mean? And be in these spaces to really because think like, I'm not supposed to be where I am and not giving that story about like where I'm from, but we're really where I'm from a little island where I came to America and I knew no one, right? So everything that was connected was based off of the places and positions that I were in to meet and to learn, but then to use each step of, or what I gained to connect that next dot, right?
Absolutely.
So, so that was, and I'm glad you even asked that, or we even tapped on that earlier, because I had forgotten about those moments, just because people always talk about the next level, right? Because I think the next level for me was what really put me into the space to really be able to like make a name and like really kind of create a company and do those things. But yeah, I definitely want to shout out those guys, man. Dallas,
Yeah.
Kenny, Slim, Leonard, like, like those are some real pivotal points in my life of foundationally like moving me forward,
Good, yeah, absolutely, and good dudes too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
from that, I'm assuming the next step is to Chiba Sounds.
Next up was Chiba Sound. Well,
Okay.
it's so funny, and I don't tell. Well, it was a day kind of dot connector, which I learned. I ended up at through the same temp agency. I ended up being Dino DeValier and Jocelyn Cooper's assistant, but for a
Wow.
day,
Wow.
though. And this was prime Cash Money, Nelly, all of that, right?
Dino was
So
flying.
flying. So I got that through a temp agency. So if you can imagine, and to be honest, I wasn't even there long enough probably for them to know who I was, right? You know what I mean? Like it was like
Mhm.
that quick. It was literally AM day. But because I had that hustle in me, I had a couple of groups that I'm working and I had some producers, I'm hustling.
Mhm.
So I'm in the building. So I'm like, wow, I'm in the building. So I'm moving floors and I'm like trying to meet guys and, da, da, da. They don't like that, right? They're like, who the fuck's this kid? You know, we we don't know him. He ain't come through the door. He ain't ushered in no way. He's through a temp agency. The temp
Yeah.
agency called me the next day and they were like, yeah, like, don't come back. I was like, so what happened? They're like, oh, they said you were taking CDs or something. And I'm like, but you gave CDs away by the dozens at that point, right? Whatever. Was it man?
CDs were collateral back
Come
then.
on, bro. You was like, so I ended up, one of the things though that ASCAP used to have this book, almost like a music book, like a Bible that had pretty much every label and every label executive in here, from like the president to, pretty much the mailroom damn near. And I had taken one of them. And so at this point, I'm like, well, I need to get back in the system. So I had like, my girlfriend at the time was sending out resumes through her job. And I was just like, oh, like I just wanted in, right?
Mhm.
Nobody would respond. I was calling. And music business, especially in those days, it was a coveted position, right? So guys ain't really giving you too much phone time or energy to like, they're like, who's this guy calling me with an accent? And like, nah, dude, right? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And you could feel the energy, right? So I was like, all right, cool. And one day I randomly just hit Chiba Sound. I didn't even know what it was, right? Obviously, you knew Def Jam, Virgin, Electra, all those things at that time. And I remember Charles Wright. I don't know if you know Charles Wright.
I don't think so. Not top.
Charles like ran Chiba for a while and then went on to go run Steve Stout's venture. What was the one right before United Masters? I think it was like the advertising agency.
Oh yes. Yeah. Well, what was it? I forget the name of that. I know exactly what you're talking about. I forget the name
I
of
don't
that
know.
agency though. Yeah.
Translation.
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 Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Charles was cool. Charles was like, hey, like, so I was like, okay, cool. You get that little bit of in, you got some game, so you're just trying to keep the conversation going, right? He's like, all right, we have an internship available. Come in for the interview. So I come in, interviewed, didn't get it, right? It's like,
Hmm.
back to square one, moving. And then one day, I don't know, I mean, I think just having the hustle and being resilient, I just called again one day and he's like, yo, like, do you want the internship? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, can you come in today? And I was like, of course. And I was there and that's when it all started.
Took off from there
Yeah.
with the phenomenal and greatly missed Dominic Trinier.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Dom's my guy. Yeah, dude.
yeah. I
Dom
met
was
him.
a
I think I met Dom through Gary Harris back
yeah,
then, and I was like, he had that gravelly voice, and he was just like,
yeah, dude.
I heard an interview you did, and you nailed it. He was one of the early downtown guys, the
Yeah,
guys that was
dude.
going to hit all the clubs downtown and dating models and just
Well,
being
see, and
in the
for
mix.
me, look, I always, and it was nothing against the record industry at all, but I think as you get to, and I think this was the beauty of like, when I talk about that Kenny era, and there's like Kenny and at 2620, like they kind of governed themselves, right?
Mm,
So it wasn't ever like I'm just at this label, the label like makes me this guy. So I have to feel like that governs who you are, that defines who you are. It was like it was all fly cats that were doing what they were doing and would have been fly with music or not, right? You know what I mean? And I feel like that's how me and my friends were at home. It's just like you didn't have to be acts to get girls or to do whatever. We would just fly. So that's how we rolled. So when I met Dom and got into that system, like I remember one meeting, like, or one like I showed up. I forget the name of the bar, but it was on one of those like Mercer or one of those side streets. And walking in and it was like Wesley Snipes and like Lisa Lou and I'm just like, wait, like what is like, you know what I mean? Like
that's
because
what it was back
these are
then, though. That's
people
what it
you
was,
see
though.
on TV, but then it's just like we're there and they're welcoming me in because I'm part of what that is, and that's just the energy. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is it, right?
Yeah.
Like I was like, this is my world and my life because now it feels like, it wasn't, let's say, the aggressiveness of, let's say, hip hop, right? Or it wasn't like so white as in pop. It was like this real middle of the road sector that was kind of like inclusive of everybody. So that was the
Everybody who
energy.
was cool.
Everybody who was cool, right? So
Yes.
from that,
Yes.
it was like, we had D'Angelo and we had Mark Ronson at the time, who was a young producer
Okay.
and like DJ. And, I was the young buck. So like I would have to take D'Angelo like money times and do whatever, play PlayStation with him for a minute and then be like, all right, I'm like,
Yeah.
but
Is
I
it
wanted
not, is it
more.
is this before D'Angelo's first album, or has the first album
No,
dropped yet?
so I think the first album was with Kedar.
Yes.
And this was the Untitled album when he had his shirt
Okay.
off, and
With the
like
shirt
that's the
off. Yep.
one that went
Yep.
crazy.
Yep.
And
And
there
how do
was
you
so
feel?
much buzz around that, right? And I was just like, really gonna get my due in this right now, right? Like it's a lot happening. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna rock with Mark because we're in the same age.
Hmm.
He was in the clubs, like it was all those things that again were of me, right? And obviously still associated with the movement because I think everything that we were doing was fly, right? Like that's when we were doing like D'Angelo and Armani parties and this and that. And then, like, but Mark was also doing like, Gucci parties and these things at a time when DJs in that time really didn't have that, right? You know what I mean? Like you had Funk Flex or Kid Capri or those guys that were doing whatever. But what was the event DJ at that time didn't really exist because the events were just starting to do like PR coming into the mix of things and you're, kind of having a event just for clothing,
Hmm.
just that whole kind of energy of things. And but also at that time you had Puff was coming in too and was mixing his worlds, right? So he was bringing hip hop to downtown and hip hop with Martha Stewart and hip hop within like, Richie and those guys' clubs and
Hmm. Ricky
Life
Kiva.
and
Yep.
Spa and all those other things, right? So,
Hmm.
and within that, Mark was the DJ of choice.
Yes.
So then I'm running with him at that point and I'm starting to look at the business different because I'm like, well, instead of being a fan of like, I'm just out partying and doing whatever. I mean, I had an amazing time in that era, but I also saw an opportunity because no one else was doing it at that time. And no one else was doing it in that magnitude at that time. I mean, it was at one point, Mark was doing like 3 or 4 jobs a night, right? Because there was nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm like, well, okay, this is a business then,
You're about
right?
to
So
say
then,
there's a business
right.
now.
So I'm like, and then with that, I would have friends. I started to build my own relationships with like the PR girls and all those other things, and they would
Lily Grubman and Jessica
100%
Rosenblum.
and all that, and like the Harrison and Schriftmans and
Mm-hmm.
Noah and Jason and all of them were
Mm-hmm.
starting like their things. This is before obviously they've built a massive conglomerate at this point, but we all were in that same space of growth and kind of moving the culture forward in that way. So I was like, well, you know what? This is kind of my duty as, let's say, the music guy, right? Or the DJ guy at that point, to continue to connect those dots, but also give it a level of service, right? So it wasn't just like, yeah, this is the fun guy, but he's not waking up to handle business or take
Yeah.
calls or do the
I can't
things
get
to
him on the
still
phone before
move the
2
business
p.m.
along, right? Like I'll be out to 4, but I'm up in the office at 9 because I loved it. You know what I mean? Like I loved what I did. And I knew that I really had an opportunity because, like I said, everybody was with D'Angelo, right? And I knew if I was there, I just would have been the like, yeah, look at me. With Mark, it was an opportunity to say, oh, well, let's really build this. And I think from that, I was really able to like build out that whole division for Chiba at that point. So it was like Mark, and then it was his sister Samantha, then it
Samantha
was
Russell.
Beverly
Yes.
Bond, and
Yes.
then it was DJ Cassidy, right?
Okay.
So those,
You had the big 4.
bro, there was nothing you could tell me at one point in like life, but still being cool and humble
Yeah, of
because
course,
that's
of
my
course.
spirit, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
it
but
was
you had the
just like
Fantastic 4.
I had built that in a way because I saw the opportunity. And I actually said this in a talk the other day, but I was like, all of the misfortunes and all of the things that didn't happen for me prepared me for what was now, right? Because if I didn't have those things, I wouldn't have been able to appreciate what and where I was and the opportunities that were given me to even have the mindset, one, to see that there was build and there was growth, but two, also to see how to help or how to understand and deal with those people that were in positions because I treated that like any other business, right? I'll
Yeah.
call, I'll check in, I'll do drinks, you show up, you dress well, you do all of those things while being still this fly guy amongst whatever. But hey, I just can't give merit. Yes, the DJs did good, and yes, they were the talk of the town, but anything could happen at that point, right? You know what I mean? So I felt like I had my duty to still be there to really be that representation because from being in like the business, like your representation is probably more than even your talent sometimes
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
that can
100%.
mess up many a deals or many things for you within that
1,000%.
space. So
1,000%.
yeah, so that was my Chiba run.
And we'll be right back. Ready to launch your podcast? Merrick Studios offers comprehensive services from concept development and seamless production to strategic marketing and monetization. Let your story take the mic. Visit merrickcreative.com/studios and let's get to work.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to our show.
So, couple quick personal facts. Beverly Bond and I used to live in the same building in Harlem.
Really?
Yeah. 150th and Riverside, 730
Okay.
Riverside. And I used to see her because she had a friend, a pretty friend, I forget her name now. And they used to run this. Probably used to run the steps in the building to stay in shape.
Right.
I actually want to get Beverly on the show at some point because I think her story is also very fascinating.
100%. Bev has an amazing
very
story.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And then secondly, you and I really linked. And I'm skipping around a bit, but you were doing a place in New York, which is gone now, called Table 50, which is on Broadway and Bleecker. You had to go
Yeah.
down the stairs. It wasn't a really big space. It was but it was one of those really cool
No,
spaces
we had
that
that place
because you would walk
cracking.
past it. You could
Yeah.
walk, and you didn't know. You would just walk past it. You wouldn't even because there wasn't like lights and shit outside or whatever. And I did a birthday party. I went there because Q-Tip was DJing, and he told me to
Yeah.
come by one time. And I went there, and I was like, "What the fuck is going on? This is amazing." It was Q-Tip and Mark spinning together.
Yeah. It was me, Q-Tip, Mark, and Blue Jams. God rest his soul.
And I remember running up on you, and I was like, "Yo, my birthday is coming up. I want to do a birthday party here." And you were like so cool because you just said yes. I thought it was
Right.
gonna be like, well, let me think. And you were like, "Yeah, okay, cool, when?" And I was like,
Yeah,
I,
but
I, I just want a list for the
right.
party. You're like, "Yeah, no problem. Just send me the list." And I was like, "Shit, that was it." So I
Yeah.
sent the list. I don't know if you knew this, but I was working at Jive at the time, and when my party was the same time, Jive used to have these annual meetings every year where like the sales staff and everybody used to come into town from the BMG labels at the time, and they, new artists would perform, and we present new music. Oh, the new R. Kelly's coming out. Here's the first single, and this type of thing. And it happened to be then, so everybody was like,
Okay.
"What are we gonna do tonight?" And it was like, we should just go to Sledge's party. Sledge is having a birthday party. And the whole staff, I don't know if you remember, they all came to my party. And that party was like the talk of the town, man. I went down, man. That was an amazing.
That probably got you a raise, no?
I was the hottest nigga in the game after
Yeah,
that
bro.
party, boy.
No,
Everybody was
honestly,
like,
that was a really good time.
it was.
Like that, I mean, thinking back on it's funny. I don't know if Mark talked about it or I think you might have mentioned it in a post on Insta or something. And
I
I had
did. What
actually
happened with
right.
Mark did a podcast with my guys, the Road podcast with Goldfinger and them, and he talked about it. And I commented under there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had just walked by it that night. So it just really brought back memories. Yeah, we used to have that place jumping,
Man.
Yeah.
Man. So I want to ask a question. We're going to skip around a bit. I'm going to get back to it, but I want to ask you your feelings on, because like you said, you were the first one that I know of to do the celebrity DJ thing. Like it was, it wasn't. I mean, I feel maybe something in LA that I know about, but in New York, you were the one. Like, so you were managing the Big Four, and your Big Four were doing literally the hottest parties and functions in the city. Like if one of those people was spinning a function, it was guaranteed to be fire. It was like there was no question it was going to be crazy. And like to see the evolution of that to this celebrity DJ kind of thing that we have now. How do you feel about that? Like just how do you feel about it in general? You ain't got to hold back too much. We don't got to throw nobody under the bus, but tell me how you feel.
I should probably be getting some residuals or something like that.
I agree.
No.
I agree.
Honestly, as you know, as simple as I was like, give me your list. I think everything that I do, out of love, and I move it forward and hoping that someone else can take from it and run with it and create it, right? I would say from, what Mark, in no way would I say that I've created any sort of DJ form or culture by any means. So let's just state that, because obviously the foundation of what that was and what that is, we know where that comes from, right? But I would say that I've had, if not was the only one to really move that side of it to a place that has now created people's lives, right?
Literally.
And that's with the utmost respect. You know what I mean? Because as I said, we all should be learning from the things that other people do to create and for people to be. But that being said, like everything evolves, right? And I think when, something becomes popular, somebody thinks that they can do it, right? Somebody's going to say that I could sing better than her, and they're going to go try it and do it. Not everyone has the chops to really do or be, but at the same time, it's also like the game, in my opinion now, it's so wide open that you could do kind of like whatever you really want to do. And I think that's with what social media is now. That's with what rap is now. That's what singing is now. There's AI that's there now. So, I mean, look, if you can do, and I say this to people all the time, I don't knock anybody for doing what it is that they want to do. The one thing that I would say is just study and give back to the craft, right? Just don't be like, oh, I think that I could do this. And there's an aux chord and there's whatever. And you're not really studying and you're not really studying the music. You're not really studying the craft. You're not really studying trying to mix. And look, you don't have to be the greatest DJ on earth, but at least attempt to give to what it is that excited you to be here. It just can't be the money. And I always say, like, you build it right, the money's going to come, right? You know what I mean? But if people, and I think that's in some ways like the event game, it's not what it was because it's like everybody thinks that they could do it. So if you think that you can do it, what was the benchmark for money that was being made? I mean, I would honestly say too, like, we set the bar for what you should be making as a DJ at that time, right? Like guys who are making 3,500 or $5,000 to DJ for 2 hours at that time. Guys were making like 10 grand at those times. That just didn't exist, right? You know what I mean? So for now, I'm sure people hear that or people see that. But with everyone doing it, a lot of people are now cutting less. I'll do it for 500 and a collab post, right? You know what I mean? So that kind of hurts the game somewhat too, because for the people that have put the work in, for the people that have the integrity, you know, and for the people who really give back to the craft, it's like, well, now you're going to take a job because of that. And look, there's a lot more to it now too, because now it's a social aspect. You know, it's the game has just changed so much within that way that I get it, right? Like if you want your brand to be seen more so by the masses, you don't really care that much about the music, unfortunately. So you might hire somebody who is going to give you impressions, but isn't going to give you vibe. So when you speak back to the things that we were doing in that time, we were like moving the needle culturally because you had to be able to play. You had to be able to set the tone. You had to be able to set the vibe because there was no social media, right? You know what I mean? Like, so there was no like, I can act like I'm doing it, but this is it. And look, this is no hate by any means. I think it's just a true reality of the era that we came from where you had to prove yourself, right? Because guys are looking at you like, yo, right? You know what I mean? Like, what, like, I'm dancing with this chick. Like, that mix is kind of crazy. Or like,
you're killing me right now.
You're just killing the vibe, right? You know what I mean? And so that's my take on it, right? You know, like I'm thankful that, look, the DJ culture is probably at its biggest that it's ever been, right? You know, I'm thankful that it has given and still gives people the opportunities to have and make a living. But yeah, it has changed. But, you know, but I've changed and I've evolved and I'm doing different things now within my life because I've had to. So in no way am I going to be like, well, damn, you shouldn't hire that girl because, or that guy because it's not whatever. You know, I mean, it's kind of like somewhat survival of the fittest, I guess, you know? It's like, but I would say like, give back to the craft, like, you know, like just because it's a special craft and it's a special art that I think people kind of don't sometimes misinterpret it and think it's just someone's up there pressing buttons, but it's a special job to be a DJ, you know?
So tell me one crazy DJ story, New York City based, off the top of your head. A party story. It doesn't have to be the DJ. It was like a crazy party. You know, it was. Tell me one.
Shoots me. What is a crazy? I have some crazy party stories outside. I mean, New York just feels so broad because New York was like where we like lived, right? So I feel like in those things and what we were doing, like it was regular, right? It was like, you know, like Table 50 or, you know, me and Bev used to do like Joe's Pub, right? So, you know, you would have, you know, Mary J or, you know, Maxwell or whoever just passing through because that was the energy at that time. So I don't know a real standout, like meaning I feel like everything is, but I always say that probably one of my most kind of monumental like achievements. Well, it was two. It was with Mark, we did John Travolta's, I want to say 60th birthday party at the one and only in Cabo. And like this had probably like the lowest celebrity there was Scarlett Johansson, right?
She was the low
She
totem
was the
pole.
lowest totem pole. So I'm there, but we're cool. We're from New York. And I'm just looking around. I'm like, wow, like this is heavy. Right? I mean, Sylvester Stallone, like Denzel, his wife, Oprah, like it was just kind of like, whoa, like this is,
Yeah.
That was probably a massive highlight. And then we left there and flew to LA on this jumbo 757 and pretty much had a comedic show by Robin Williams the whole way back.
On the plane.
On the plane. I'm just like, bro, like you just can't with all of these people on the plane, right? I'm just like, wow, that's a real moment. And just something that was outside of what was, because like New York was our norm, right? At like that point,
that's home.
We're running downtown, we're doing parties, we're whatever, we're doing events. Like that was some LA next 1% type thing, right?
Yeah.
And then the second was probably we did Oprah's school opening in South Africa with DJ Cassidy.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah. So that was the second part. Like that was almost like as equal, but this was like the Black who's who, right? You had like Tina Turner and Chris Rock and Quincy Jones. What was the guy who they just did the movie about at that time? Like Will Smith played him. I forget the name of him, but I think he was homeless and then he became
Pursuit of Happiness. What is
right.
it? Chris something.
Right.
I can't remember his last name. Yeah.
He was there and it was just like, and again, it's just like Cicely Tyson, Sidney Poitier. I'm just like, dude, like this is it, right? Because those aren't the average people you see on a regular basis, right?
No.
Like, yeah, we see the guys in like the club or the models or this or that or some crazy thing. Yeah, but at some point, it's just a regular night at the office, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But to see and be in that was kind of like,
crazy.
All right, like we're really moving the needle and culture, and we've come a long way from, sending or taking D'Angelo money and doing and creating these things. It's like, like we're the heartbeat of sound and kind of culture from a DJ standpoint and giving them and curating these experiences for these people, right? Or like, in Dubai with Naomi Campbell for her, like it's just all of those type of things is where I felt like we had really moved. And those were the things that I was like, oh, like we're getting on a plane to do what? Like, oh, you know what I mean? So it was like, those are probably my biggest highlights when I think about, and look, I love New York. Like New York is what truly made me. And I think there's a ton of, probably great experiences that if I really thought about it, that I could speak about and can speak about, right? But I think that was the foundation of all of us that were in that time and that were in that era. So
absolutely. It was somewhere to go all the time. And like you said, if you were going to the cool stuff, the Moombas and the Bungalow 8s and those type of places, you never knew who you were going to see, and you just never knew where the night was going to take you. It was just like, yo, Q-Tip told me to come to something. I don't remember where it was, man, half these places. And I went to some downtown joint and the Spice Girls were there. And I was like, yo, what's going on? Like, it's like you said, you run into these things. And I'm sure more with you because you were managing Mark, you were out more than me. But yeah,
it's
it was
not
incredible.
like that anymore though,
No, it's not. I mean, look, it's really not. It's really
not. I'm sure this era has their things that are that now. And because I always hate to be that guy that's like, in our day.
Yeah.
But I truly think, as I mentioned earlier, that because of social media, because of how things are so easily accessed, I think at that point, the accessibility wasn't that easy, right? So you had to
know somebody,
or be a part, or know somebody.
Yeah, you weren't getting in. If you didn't know somebody, you wasn't getting in.
The door,
exactly.
And kind of know those things, and know Henry, and know all these guys that were still cool. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know what I
exactly.
mean? Like, nah, that ain't it. Not tonight.
No, not
right? You
tonight.
know what I mean? And you'd be like,
It's
oh,
not for you.
right. And you're frazzled, right?
Yeah, you're
Because
like,
you
shit.
couldn't even have the FOMO of now looking at your phone. I was like, that's whack anyway. It's just kind of like you just saw 4 baddies walk in and you're like,
Dude, come on, B.
and he's like, nah, not tonight.
Nah, not tonight. Step to the side, brother.
Exactly.
So you're managing Mark. You're doing this. So tell me what that evolves to after you have that run with the Big Four and some others.
Right.
What do you go to next?
So of course I'm in these rooms now because now, as I said earlier, I felt the music business would have just limited me, right? Because
Yes.
it was just almost like a cooler ASCAP in a sense, right? It was all about them. With this, I was playing in a field with everyone, right? And so because I'm moving and shaking and it's music stuff, it's fashion stuff, it's PR, it's all these other things, I had some amazing opportunities that came to me, right? Like a friend of mine, Rex Amore, I think now he's like Yo Gotti's right hand or doing that with Gorilla and all them. He had got an opportunity to manage Pretty Ricky when they were signed to Atlantic. And I think, he was just starting in like the game and, me and him were friends. And he was just like, dude, like come and like help me, right? And I was just like, yeah, cool. Like, because we were moving, right? And I was in it. And so it was that. We managed them for like the first album,
Okay.
And then after that, I ended up managing Cat DeLuna.
Okay.
So we had done her deal at Sony, at Epic, and then moved her over to, where was it? At Universal with Sylvia.
Okay.
I did that for a few, but then I was like, yo, this like music business, like I need to get back to like my energy because I felt like it was pulling me too much out of my vibe.
Okay.
So then I went back to doing that. I was doing a few producers and things in like that space, but then just, really kind of hunkered down on like building more like DJs. And then that's when we brought in like DJ Kiss and MOS and we had DJ Ruckus and like just really started to build out really what was that kind of DJ platform, right? Like I'd worked with D Nice early in the beginning. So it's like, because that's what I knew and that's what I really felt great at, right? Like the like music business stuff I liked, but it was just like, it was too much going on in there. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was this department and that department and this level of red tape and that. I was like, bro, like I'm downtown flowing. Like, you know what I mean? Like we ain't got time for that, right? Like we're out and we're moving and we're here and we're on planes and we're doing all of that stuff. Like you can't cut me short because I'm got to deal with this. And look, I'm not knocking the music business by any means. It just wasn't for me.
Okay.
Right? You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't where I was supposed to be. I mean, I have great friends that were in it that are still great friends. I mean, me and you are great friends. And I've met you through all of those spaces too.
Absolutely.
It just wasn't for me. And I think I understood that like very early.
Yeah. So is this when you built DGI or was DGI already in motion?
Well, DGI I kind of got ousted from Chiba because I think I had a little too much power at one point.
You were popping. You were too popping.
I was too popping, and people don't really like that.
They really don't.
And it was a very interesting time because like Dom is my man, 50 grand, God rest his soul, right? And I was doing something, almost having my man's back in building this because I'm looking at it like, well, we're building this together. It was never in my mind to say I'm going to skip out and go take this and do this for me. Like one, that's just not my spirit, right? If we rock, we rock. If we don't, then we don't, right? But if I'm got your back, I'm here to support you through whatever you need because Mark needed to be managed at that time.
He did. He had too much going on.
Because he had so much going on and he was a star within his own right where, it was a possibility that might have got lost. I don't know, but just saying, right? Like people come into your lives at certain times and when they can understand their position, I'm like, yeah, you're the boss, but I'm still going to be fly. You're not taking my flyness because as I said earlier, like, when running with Kenny and those guys or running with my guys from Bermuda, we're all fly. So no matter where we are, we still going to be that guy, right? So, and that does, but that still doesn't mean I have to be disloyal, right? You know what I mean? And I think, he partnered with some people that I think, like didn't really, in my opinion, want to give me what I thought that I was worth.
Okay.
At the time, that deal might have been good. It just didn't seem good to me based off of what I had built. And so they were like, yeah, well, you kind of got to go. And I was kind of like, really? All right. And, I say this with the utmost love that if it wasn't for Mark, in all seriousness, I don't know where I might have been at this point, right? Now, would I have been a success in something? Of course, because I'm a winner. But at the same time, for what I was doing at that point and the level that I was in and what I was giving to him in his career at that time, because he could have said, nah, I'm just going to let them handle it, right? Then I would have had to figure it out. And not saying that I couldn't have figured it out with a Beverly or with a Cassidy or with a Sam, right? You know what I mean? But to have that, which was at the pinnacle of where he was breaking into the next stage of his career in producing, it really gave me look, everybody wants to feel like respected, right? You know what I mean? Like, so everybody wants to feel like, okay, this work that I've put in, this work that I've done, because most times, as you know, managers don't get respect or managers don't get thank yous. It's always like, well, you should be doing this.
Yeah.
And if it's wrong, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean?
And when it goes right, it's never your fault.
When it's right, it's never your fault.
Never.
And it's just, and so to me, that was my thank you, right? In a sense, because he could have just been like, all right, dude, like,
yeah,
kind of got to go there, right?
Yeah.
And it would have been cool too. But I think just that even put another battery in my back of like, I really did create something that was this.
Yeah.
I really was good at what I did. I really was really in a space of now, like, I have to go even harder to create and be because I didn't know how long that window was going to be, right?
Yeah.
But I knew I had it now. So while I had it now, I had to maximize that to its utmost potential and not take that for granted, right? Because as you know, within this business, we're all growing, right? I mean, in life, in relationships, if anything, you can't date a girl or meet a girl one way and then 4 years later, you're thinking you're acting the same way. It's kind of like, no, like if you're both evolving, then you need to keep evolving, get to that point of where it's maturing the relationship and maturing what those things really need to be, So, but yeah, dude, those were great times, man. Those were like really, really good times. So I was forced to like have to start DGI. I had no business plan. I had no money. Meaning not money to start a business.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
It was kind of like, all right, well, this check is continuing to move this and it's rent and this goes to whatever. But again, I think because of all of what happened, and I'm a huge believer, I think especially now within life like that, I'm a huge believer in God and his timing, right? And the things that we learn, and sometimes we're not even understanding what those lessons are at that time because we think this is what we want for our lives at this time, right? And not knowing that those disappointments and those things are all life lessons and are leading you to where we are within our lives now.
Exactly.
Because even to have these conversations, like thinking back on that, even with who I was as a person or as a man, I think I'm the same, but I'm completely different. Right? You know what I mean? And it's like, any of those things or any of those turmoil or any of that, man, like somebody else is starting or like DJ company, like I'm a little nervous now because, like, I don't know because, like it was just me, right? You know what I mean? Like, so it's just all of those things as you're kind of moving and continuing to build to even bring you back to yourself of like, well, nah, I'm that guy. Like I did this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's continue on that path of what you did to build and create and continue to move things forward, to have that self confidence, to have that love and that honor within yourself, to know that I can do it again. I can build, I can do whatever it is that I need to do, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, that was the beginning of DGI, dude. Just thinking back on that, just giving me so much kind of memories of that time, you know?
So tell me what's going on now. Tell me what you're doing right now. What you're working on. What you. I know you're building, growing. What you doing?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm in an amazing space in my life, right? Right now, I actually call it my paradise suite. I ended up in Bermuda for COVID. I thought COVID
Not
would
a
be
bad
two
place to
weeks.
be
Yeah,
for
I
COVID.
thought it would be 2 weeks. It ended up being 2 years, total reset.
Mm-hmm.
Really kind of got me in a space of truly understanding because the business didn't really exist at that time, you know? So, you know, the money wasn't flowing like it did, or, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, fortunately we're in better positions within our lives. So, you know, I was able to maintain, right? And still
Yeah.
be in spaces and let things be. But it just really kind of like reset me and like really pivoted me in a way of being back with family, being back within a Caribbean culture. And I'd started to manage an artist by the name of Cass kind of right before. So Cass is probably, in my eyes, the number one soca artist in the world.
Okay.
And some people, he could be two, he could be whatever, but he's doing amazing things within the space. And I started managing him because I think they were at the pinnacle of success within Trinidad, right? You know, and kind of wanted to kind of move and kind of break through culturally or move the culture to a different space.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I started managing him, and you know, we did a bunch of amazing things within the COVID time, from just giving things to the culture and to the people to make them feel good.
Yeah.
We did a live album, you know, but through all these things, we're just kind of strategizing on where we're moving him and his music to. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey. It feels very purposeful. I
Good.
think, you know, being able to tap back into Caribbean culture, right? And being able to help kind of, I was telling somebody, it almost feels like me again with the early DJ culture, right? Like I kind of
Mm.
have that feeling again because it's like we're breaking new ground, right? Because soca artists tour, but don't really tour doing ticketed shows, right? So it's
Okay.
more you're
A
caught in a
festival kind of
carnival
thing.
loop.
Carnival.
Well,
Okay.
you're kind of
Carnival.
caught. It kind of bases from Trinidad Carnival, and then you kind of cycle through the carnival or the diaspora promoters,
Okay.
where you know you're kind of making money, but you're not necessarily building career, right? You know what I mean? When you kind of think about the music business, and so I think we were able to start to tour differently, start to release music differently, start to present differently, start to talk to brands differently, start to do pretty much all of the things that I did when I was in all of those early eras of building DGI and the D'Angelo things and the losing the job things and the connecting of all these things and people, because now it's like, all right, I can really do that for my people, but then also wanting to show by example that, and in hope that others learn from what we're doing as well, to want to do that same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as
Mm-hmm.
you know, the power isn't just in one man, right? So I
Never.
like to speak about we's and the culture in we's because I want us to be able to grow as a culture. I want us to be able to grow as just a unit overall, right? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Just in terms of us, like not just Caribbean, but even Black. But I speak more to the Caribbean side of it because you know, there is some separation between like dancehall and reggae and this island and that island. And I'm just like, if we can unite in ways, it helps everybody be successful, right? So like we just sold out. We sold out Central Park Summer Stage last year
Wow.
in like 24 hours. This year, we sold it out in four, the first
Wow.
show, and we sold it out in pre-sale.
Wow.
Did a second show that we announced. It sold out in an hour and a half, right? And so when I look at and when I speak to, oh damn, like when we look at like the moving the needle culturally and being able to show people it and see what we're doing, like for me, that's a metric, right? That's showing like the proof is in the numbers of what we did. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, and when
Yeah.
we look at now we're selling hard tickets and we're moving things in that way. Like the proof is in
But it's
what we're
black and
doing.
white. The numbers are the
It's
numbers. You
it's
can't
like black and
fake
white,
it.
but it's also it wasn't that the first year that we did it. The first year we did it, we took a loss, right? But it's the understanding of where do you see it going and where do
Yeah,
you see it
it's
being?
building it. It's
It's
never
the
gonna.
building. And
Yeah,
then
you
with
can't
that,
fall off the first year because that's just yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
so it's that, and I just think it's, just still being me within that space now, right?
Yeah.
But still,
Yeah.
I'm everywhere now still,
Yeah.
but it's just now it's in a better form. And I think the biggest part for me, honestly, is that the work feels purposeful, right? You know what I mean? Like it truly feels like it's of me, right? Because it is me in that sense of like, I was raised on the islands. I was raised to that style of music. I was raised to these things. And a lot of us, as a lot of people in small American towns, don't have the opportunities
Mm-hmm.
to be able to connect the dots and do these things in higher forms. So,
Yeah.
it's my goal to, help be an ambassador for that as well to the people that we're representing through that. So that's one. And then, I'm doing my little DJ stuff, well, I don't want to say little because I'm enjoying it, but I'm like releasing music and producing music in like a kind of house, Afro house type space,
Okay.
mixing some of the Caribbean elements in with
That's dope.
that as
That's
well.
dope.
And kind of DJing that and, started a small label of my own that I'm kind of distributing my music and some of my friends' music and just kind of again just creating an energy and a vibration because like
Yeah.
that's that was downtown, right? So I'm technically still downtown. We're just putting those elements of downtown into the spaces that I'm vibing in, right? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And in the people that you're around and the events that you're curating and the things that you're doing. But yeah, man, it's a really good time.
You
I feel
sound
really
good, man.
great.
You sound happy, man. You sound good, you know?
Well, that's
You
the
sound really
biggest
good.
thing. It's probably happiness more than anything, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
able to stand and kind of love myself in the ways that I probably didn't previously. And that's allowing me to see all of these things clearly, right? And
Yeah.
the things that I want to be a part of, and the things that I don't want to be a part of, were before. And I think that's probably where a lot of that or that unhappiness was before I ended up back in Bermuda. It's because, yeah, you were making great money and you're doing all these things, but how fulfilling was it, right?
Yeah.
And how
Sometimes
much
you
did it really serve me in that space? So to strip
need to go
down
home.
100% and really be in, I was in my childhood bedroom, on a full size mattress, right? Like with just me and my parents. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's like that's some real like not knowing if the world is ending, right? You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Absolutely.
that was some real like thought provoking stuff that
Mm-hmm.
I really got the time to really meditate and hone in on like, well, who is Damon? Like what are my whys? Like, what are the things that I really want to do for this next era of my life? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do I still want to give the same energy to the same things, even though it's making me great money? Right? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is that giving me purpose? Is that giving me fulfillment to want to teach the next generation of kids or people who are watching? Right? Because I always say they're always watching, right? But like, what are you doing to kind of be that person, to be a role model or to be a leader within this space? Because the money just can't make you a
Yeah.
leader or a role model, right? Because the money
Uh-huh.
drives you to do things that you might not
You know
want
what
to
to
do,
do.
thinking you have
Exactly.
to be that, right? You know what
Exactly.
I mean? Like, I
Exactly.
want to be able to teach and show you game by example and then be able to speak to those things so you can say, yeah, that dude might not drive a Lamborghini, but his fly is fuck and he's able to really speak to me in a way that feels like I'm of him. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think those are the things that I'm really kind of like basing. So I thank you for having me on here because, I think part of what I'm doing now too is even wanting to speak more and speak to those things just because it's needed.
Yeah.
And it's definitely needed for our people,
Yeah, and honestly, and we'll wrap it up. But that's my main motivation to doing this is like I know so many people who have done so many great things, and I want to give them, yourself included, obviously, a platform to talk about it, the highs and the lows, because it ain't all
Right.
sweet and it ain't all bad. It's
100%.
It's a ride, and hopefully somebody hear this and listen to it and be like, okay, I learned something.
Yeah.
What to look for in my journey. So we're kind of doing the same thing, different, but with the same kind of mindset. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, it's our duty to teach,
Yeah, exactly.
And it's our duty to share the knowledge in ways and forms that allow or to make it palatable for people and kids to understand it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if not, it can go over their heads.
Yeah.
Or, I don't want to preach to you. I want to be able to talk and reason with you and ask me questions so you can see how to maneuver better within your life to make it better. Because I want you, as you should want me and everybody else to be successful. It just can't be me and you, right?
Yeah.
But why keep the game to myself?
Yeah.
Why keep the game to yourself if you can teach whoever how to get it? That just makes it better. You know what I mean? Like I was telling somebody earlier and then I actually have to go because I have a call at 3. But
okay.
But like I've had some really great executives come from under me that are doing great, and that makes me feel amazing because it means that like I've done something right to instill the energy or how they should do into them to be. But what? I'm not going to give that knowledge because I don't want you to be successful because it should be all me. It can't work like that. You know what I mean? Like we have to share the knowledge.
Yep.
Got to share the knowledge.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it, man. I really appreciate it. This is a good interview. I can't wait to put it up. This was really good. This is really good. Thank you again.
Yeah, no, Sledge. Thank you, brother. It's been a minute, but I feel like in chatting with you, it was just like yesterday. So
felt like we talked last week.
Yeah, that's the beauty of friendship.
Exactly. You can catch Mixed and Mastered on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that follow button, leave a review, and tell a friend. I'm your host, Jeffrey Sledge. Mixed and Mastered is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.